A plantation owner recorded a baby as stillborn. 14 days later, he sold that same baby for $475. The mother's name was Eliza Carter. She was listed in the same ledger, page after page, as a labor unit. Her grief was not recorded. Her loss was not recorded. But the sale was, because the sale had a dollar value, and dollar values always made it into the ledger. Here is how this ends. Thomas W. Hargrove, the man who wrote Stillborn in that ledger, was formally charged by the Freedmen's Bureau in 1866. He paid $600 in penalties. That payment was extracted through a lien placed directly on his cotton yield. And Eliza Carter, the woman he tried to erase from her own child's story, testified against him in federal proceedings. Her son Samuel was returned to her. By 1870, they were living together in Jefferson County. She was 38 years old. He was 11. The document that proves all of this still exists. Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. Vicksburg Subdistrict. Case file number 217. Filed August 14th, 1866. Welcome to Dark Tales USA, where plantation ledgers, Freedmen's Bureau files, and federal court records bring back the names that history tried to erase. Did you learn this story in school? Yes or no? Drop it in the comments right now. And if these records matter to you, subscribe, so these names are never forgotten. The cotton ledger for the Hargrove Plantation in Jefferson County, Mississippi, runs from 1848 to 1866. It is not a diary. It is not a memoir. It is an accounting document. Columns of names, labor values, crop yields, and transactions. Every person on that plantation was reduced to a number. Every number had a purpose. The ledger pages were thick, stiff, the kind of paper built to outlast the people recorded inside it, built to survive. And it did survive, long enough for a federal investigator to open it in 1866 and find something that was never meant to be found. Eliza Carter appears in that ledger for the first time in 1852. She is listed by name, which was not always the case. Some entries use only a first name. Some use only a physical description. Eliza Carter has both a first and last name, which tells us she had been on this plantation long enough to be known. Long enough to be tracked. The ledger described her in the 1852 quarterly entry as able-bodied, full labor. 3 words that meant she was strong enough to be worth watching, strong enough to be assigned the heaviest work rotations, strong enough that her absence from any column would be noticed immediately. From 1852 to 1858, her entries are consistent. Labor value recorded every quarter. Condition noted. Able-bodied, full labor, no deductions. She was, in the language of the ledger, productive. And productive meant valuable, and valuable meant watched. March 3rd, 1859. The entry reads, Eliza, child delivered, stillborn. 4 words, no further detail, no record of burial, no notation of Eliza's condition afterward. The ledger moves on to the next entry the same day. Cotton bale count, storage weight, transport costs. Her child was given 4 words. The cotton got 3 lines. But here is what the ledger did not expect. 14 days later, March the 17th, 1859, a separate entry on a different page. Infant, mulatto, sold. $475. Buyer, J.R. Kincaid. No mother listed in the sale column. No reference back to the March 3rd entry. No connection drawn on paper between the woman who delivered and the infant who was sold. That was intentional. That gap, those 14 days in those 2 separate pages, was the crime. And it took 7 years, a federal bureau, and one woman's sworn testimony to close it. Before March 3rd, 1859, before the ledger reduced her to 4 words, Eliza Carter had a life inside the boundaries she was given. She had been on the Hargrove Plantation since at least 1852. 7 years in that ledger, 7 years of quarterly entries. Hargrove Ledger, Volume 1 through Volume 2, 1852 through 1858. 7 years of her labor keeping those columns solvent. She was not a background figure. She was central to the operation. Her labor value among the highest recorded for women on the property. She knew the land. She knew the weight of a cotton boll in August heat. How your fingers split after the 3rd day of picking. How the rows never seemed to end. How the sun sat directly overhead from 11 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, and there was nowhere to go that was not inside it. She knew the seasons. She knew which overseer wrote in the ledger and which one did not bother. She knew what it meant when your name appeared in certain columns and what it meant when it disappeared from others. By 1858, the year before, her entries in Volume 2 show something new, a notation that Bureau investigators would later identify as a pregnancy marker. Labor value slightly reduced. Physical condition noted as limited, temporary. In plantation ledger language, that meant one thing. She was carrying a child. What that child meant to her, no document records. The ledger was not interested in what things meant to Eliza Carter. It was interested in what things were worth. And an infant, depending on complexion, health, and the buyer's market, could be worth several $100s. The entry from March the 17th confirms the buyer paid $475 for this one. At 1859 values, that was roughly equivalent to 8 months of skilled labor wages in the region. It was not a small transaction. It was planned. The notation mulatto in the sale entry, that specific word, tells us the child's appearance had already been assessed, already been factored into the price. Someone knew that baby was alive in March 3rd. Someone made a calculation, and someone picked up a pen and wrote stillborn anyway. Where are you listening from right now? Drop your city in the comments. When the Freedmen's Bureau began reviewing plantation records in Jefferson County in the summer of 1866, they were not looking for Eliza Carter specifically. They were conducting a broad estate review. Hargrove had filed a compensation claim, and Bureau policy required examination of all plantation documents before any federal funds moved. The investigator assigned to the Hargrove file sat down with Volume 3 of the ledger, 1859 through 1866. He was working through it page by page. His finger moved down the columns slowly, stopped, moved back up, stopped again. March 3rd, stillborn. March 17th, infant sold, $475. In a ledger built on precise accounting, where every bale, every wage, every transaction was cross-referenced, there was no cross-reference between these two entries. A stillborn infant generates no sale value. A sale entry generates no burial record. The two entries could not both be true, and yet both entries were in the same ledger, in the same handwriting, 14 days apart. The investigator flagged it in the Vicksburg Subdistrict Administrative Log, August 1866. Then he kept reading. What he found next made the first problem worse. Eliza Carter's labor entries after March 1859, still in Volume 3, pages 12 through 18, show a sharp reduction in recorded value, consistent with postpartum recovery. The ledger, without meaning to, had confirmed she had delivered a living child. A stillborn delivery does not produce weeks of reduced labor capacity at the specific pattern recorded. The body's own recovery had been logged, and it contradicted the death entry on the same page. The ledger had tried to hide the sale, but it had accidentally recorded the proof that the sale was real. No document tells us the exact moment Eliza Carter understood what had happened to her son. No court record captures that, but the Bureau case file notes, filed September 2, 1866, describe her testimony as detailed, consistent, and without hesitation. She knew the date. She knew the buyer's name. She knew the amount. She had been carrying that information for 7 years. The record is silent on how she held on to it, but the pattern in the documents tells its own story. One word. How does this make you feel? Leave it in the comments below.
Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, Vicksburg Subdistrict. This was not a small office handling small complaints. By the summer of 1866, the Vicksburg Subdistrict had processed hundreds of cases: wage theft, forced labor contracts, fraudulent record-keeping, unlawful separation of families. Eliza Carter's complaint, case file number 217, filed August 14, 1866, was one of dozens active that season, but the ledger evidence made it stand out. The investigator did not stop at the March entries. He pulled the full 1859 transaction record and found that J.R. Kincaid, the buyer listed in the sale entry, had purchased 3 infants from Hargrove Properties between 1857 and 1860. In each case, the Plantation record listed the child as stillborn or deceased. In each case, a sale entry appeared within 30 days. 3 children, 3 falsified death records, 3 buyers, 1 pattern. Hargrove was not conducting a single act of deception in a moment of desperation. He had done this before. He had a method. The method was simple: record the death, execute the sale, keep the entries on separate pages, and trust that no one with authority would ever cross-reference them. He had been right for 7 years. He was right until Reconstruction put federal investigators inside his ledger. August in Mississippi. The cotton was chest-high. The harvest was weeks away. While the Bureau was building its case through August and September of 1866, Hargrove continued his routine, managing harvest logistics, supervising labor contracts under the new wage system, filing his own compensation paperwork with federal offices. He was standing in his fields making calculations about bale weight and transport cost. He did not know that the same federal system processing his compensation claim was simultaneously reviewing Volume 3 of his ledger, page 47 specifically, where the numbers did not add up. He had no idea what was coming. November 3, 1866. The Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, Vicksburg Subdistrict, issued its ruling in case file number 217. Thomas W. Hargrove was formally charged on 2 counts. First, fraudulent record-keeping. The March 3, 1859 entry recording the infant as stillborn was determined to be a falsified document. The cross-entry analysis, birth notation versus sale entry versus Eliza Carter's postpartum labor record, Volume 3, pages 12 through 18, provided the documentary basis. The ledger convicted him with his own handwriting. Second, unlawful separation of a minor from a freedwoman. Under Reconstruction-era Bureau jurisdiction, the separation of a child from a formerly enslaved mother, particularly through deceptive record-keeping, fell within the Bureau's enforcement authority. Eliza Carter was that mother. Samuel was that child. The penalties were specific: $475, restitution matching the exact recorded sale value of the infant. This number came directly from Hargrove's own ledger entry. He had set the price. The Bureau used that price against him. $125 additional financial penalty for falsification of plantation records. Total enforced payment, $600. Not a round number chosen for simplicity. $600 because $475 plus $125 equals $600. The math was as deliberate as the original crime. Hargrove did not pay voluntarily. The Bureau placed a lien on his 1866 cotton yield, his harvest already being weighed and baled and prepared for market. The cotton he had grown, the crop he had counted on, gone. The payment was extracted from that yield and recorded in Bureau Financial Compliance Records, December 1866. He had spent 7 years profiting from a falsified record. The Bureau spent 4 months dismantling it, and then they reached into his harvest and took back what he owed. Eliza Carter had testified on September 2, 1866, 63 days before that ruling. She had walked into a federal proceeding, identified her son by name, stated his birth date, confirmed he had been born alive, and named the buyer. She gave them everything they needed. She had been waiting 7 years to say it out loud. If this record stayed with you, there are more on this channel. Subscribe so these names are never forgotten.
The Bureau's follow-up compliance notation, filed in 1867, records that Samuel Carter was recovered from the Kincaid estate following a creditor seizure and transferred to his mother under Bureau supervision. The transfer is documented. The date is recorded. The child's return has a paper trail. He was approximately 8 years old when he came home. The 1870 United States Census, Jefferson County, Mississippi, lists Eliza Carter, age 38, occupation, washerwoman. Household includes 1 male child, name, Samuel Carter, age 11. She was washing other people's clothes to keep them fed. She had testified before a federal bureau. She had waited 7 years. She had named the buyer, stated the price, described her son from memory, and she had been right about every detail. The ledger that tried to erase Samuel Carter listed him as stillborn on March 3, 1859. The 1870 census listed him as alive, age 11, living with his mother in the same county where he was born and sold and recovered. He survived. She survived. They found each other. That is not a small thing. In Jefferson County, Mississippi, in 1866, that required a federal investigation, a formal ruling, a financial penalty, a lien on a cotton harvest, and 1 woman who refused to let 7 years of silence become permanent. Thomas William Hargrove paid $600 in December 1866. The lien on his 1866 cotton yield was enforced and recorded. His 1867 compensation claim, filed with the same bureau that had just penalized him, was denied. The grounds for denial are listed in the Vicksburg subdistrict records. The man who had profited from falsified death records was not entitled to federal compensation. The Bureau agreed on both questions. This record still exists. Others do not. If this story stayed with you, leave 1 word in the comments. Hargrove's compensation claim was stamped denied in the spring of 1867. Eliza Carter's name was added to the federal compliance record in December 1866.